Mr. President, I want to address another topic, and that's the topic of tariffs. They are doing incredible harm to our economy in Vermont. In my view, they're doing long-term damage to our economy here in the United States. I want to commend my colleagues, Senator Paul, Senator Kane, and others, Senator Shaheen, Ranking Member Wyden, Ranking Member Shaheen, and Leader Schumer for sponsoring the bipartisan legislation we voted on yesterday, suspending the emergency authority on which the president was acting to impose a tariff on Brazil, a country, by the way, with whom we have a trade surplus. We're 9 months into this trade war with tariffs at the forefront. And it's a war with Canada. It sort of started with them. That's a big deal for Vermont. We're a border state, but it's a big deal for all of our states because Vermont is one of 34 states whose major trading partner is Canada. For Vermont, Canada's been our largest export market and the largest source of imports. Trade with Canada accounted for 35% of our state exports and 67% of Vermont's imports and 56% of its total trade. And we've got small businesses now that are really struggling to keep their lights on. And we've got farmers across the country, but also farmers in Vermont who are incredibly worried about whether they're going to be able to make it into the next harvest. We've had a drought, we had early floods, and now we have these tariffs that are increasing the input cost. And I know, Mr. President, as a senator from Indiana, you're very sensitive to the challenges that our agricultural economy, our farmers face. But as things were bumping along, then President Trump just recently announced an additional 10% tariff on Canada, which already had a 35% effective rate. And we don't even know what that applies to. Is that 10% on top of 35%, or is it on specific products? And of course, all of that was done because the president was irritated about an ad that was run apparently by the province of Ontario that was quoting a speech that President Reagan made some years ago about how destructive tariffs are. So maybe that does irritate the president, but the constant changing of what a tariff is from day to day creates havoc for our businesses that are trying to plan and control their expenses and deal with all the other uncertainties that they face. You know, these tariffs are hurting our farmers. Just think about this. Fertilizers, those costs are up 16%, and in some cases 39%. The effective rate on tractors and other farming machinery is 16% and 13%, respectively. We've also had, as a result of the tariffs that are seen by our trading partner in Canada, that was the participant in the U.S.-Mexico-Canadian trade agreement, negotiated, by the way, by President Trump in an agreement that he bragged about as being really effective and the best trade agreement. That's getting ripped up in many ways. And then when you add to it the insults that were hurled at Canada, the 51st state, the governor of Canada, it's had a catastrophic impact on the tourism that Vermont has depended on from our Canadian neighbors with whom we have enormous respect. That's not just true for Vermont. New Hampshire, Maine, Montana are seeing an incredible drop in tourism that's related to this tariff battle and the rhetoric associated with it. Also, in Vermont, just as in Indiana, our small businesses are really a big deal. And I'm hearing from them. I'm hearing from bed and breakfasts, motels, brewers and distillers, any industry. I'll give a few stories. Pardon me, a few quotes. Simon Perkins at Orvis in Manchester. The reality is that in a rapidly changing tariff environment, one that's forced on companies too quickly, it's really hard for business to respond quick enough to make it work. Orvis, which was founded in 1856, pardon me, announced the closure of 31 stores and 5 outlet locations by 2026. And Orvis had to lay off 50 employees, citing tariffs. Another business, Peter Case at Barrow Sports in Brattleboro. We love what we do when it's under attack. For 90 years, Barrow Sports has proudly served Brattleboro, growing with our community through good times and hard ones. Today, economic pressures, rising costs, and shrinking margins pardon me, are testing small local businesses like never before. Jim Hall, Vermont Country Store. This is the lull before the storm. Do they realize this is a tax on Christmas? These tariffs are a tax. They're paid for by our businesses. They disrupt our businesses. They are passed on to consumers. And it is nothing but downside, especially when you add to the fact that these tariffs are a tax. They're imposed and implemented in a totally arbitrary way, where a person who's running a business has to contend with all the uncertainties of a volatile marketplace, has to deal with the constant uncertainties that are the result of ever-changing tariff policy. Mr. President, I urge all of us in the Senate to reassert our own authority under Article 1, which gives to the Congress the power to tax, the power to impose tariffs or not, and to not have us continue to relinquish the authority and responsibility we have as the United States Senate to an executive. This is our responsibility. And part of that reason is because we are close to people who are affected by these policies. And it is a shirking of responsibility for the United States Senate to essentially cede that authority to a president. And particularly when we're seeing in every single state the harmful impacts on folks in our states, businesses in our states, farmers and ranchers in our states that are working hard to try to pull things together and keep their businesses going, our economy going, and contributing to the well-being of our country. Mr. President, I call on the President to reconsider what these tariffs are doing. I call on our United States Senate to reassert its authority and be the decider of what tariff policy shall be in this country. I yield back.